There you go.
Hey everybody, my name is Elizabeth. I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to the Big Book Compendium, Designed for Living Big Book Study. We are on page 22, and the chapter There is a Solution. Perhaps there never will be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We are not sure why, once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. You want to talk anything about that?
Yeah. I like how it says that it is bodily and mentally. It is also physically as well, like we start to feel like that peace, sense, and ease of, the first drink, and it's like that mental obsession and that phenomenon of craving, that we have once we take one and we're like at peace with ourselves. I I think that's like a train reaction. It's like we take the first drink and then we start feeling that ease and comfort, and then it just kind of like takes off from there. We start having the consequences of our drinking, and then it just kind of spirals from there. We go on binges, and then it just keeps getting worse for us. Um, so that's kind of how, that happens for me is, I have that allergy, I just can't just have one or two, it's not like I break out like, hives or um um like peanuts, having like a peanut allergy, but it's just like, I can't just have one and I'm done. It's just I have to have multiple, and I'm just completely allergic to it because, I obsess over it and then it just spirals out of control for me. So, that's all I have for that paragraph. I'll read the next paragraph and then if you want to share after. These observations would be an academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses, and any of these, sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of havocs alcoholics drinking bout creates. These sound like the philosophically philosophically the man who having a headache beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he cannot feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. Elizabeth, anything?
Oh, absolutely. I always tell people to draw a line above this paragraph all the way across, and because this is where they stop talking about the body and they start talking about the mind, right? And then the rest of this is about, they'll keep talking about the mind, right? Because that's what we're here to treat. If it was about drinking or not drinking, why would we still be here? Why would I be here 37 years in a sobriety? I wouldn't need to be here. But I find that, you know, I don't just go through this book once, and I go back through it to learn and deepen my understanding to become more effective in my recovery. And this is one of those paragraphs. It's like I can look at this and see anything that I do that causes problems in my life, right? If I'm living in the bedevilments on page 52, if, my life looks like the top of 18 or 60 to 63, I can look at things like this and say, if none of this makes sense, the stuff I'm doing, because I'm getting the same results. There's something that my broken mind can't fix a broken mind. Right? And if you ask me about it, if you say, hey, you're making bad decisions over there, Elizabeth, what are you doing? Right? If I'm not ready for help, I'm just going to get irritated and not talk to you or argue with you, which of course later on will be in working with others. And when you and we, I don't know where we'll talk about this, but if an alcoholic's not ready for help, you're just hitting a wall over and over and over again because they're just going to come up with reasons why they don't want to accept the truth and see the truth. And I did all this too. I mean, I've done it in my drinking life and in sobriety. I have 100 alibis. I can tell you why my life is crazy. I can tell you why I ended up getting wasted and going home with a stranger, right? I had all these excuses, and all of the excuses, all of the alibis, as they call it, were designed to make me think that I still had control and power over what I was doing, that I still had choice, right? And because my ego doesn't want me to know that I don't have a choice or that there's something wrong that needs to be looked at, because I don't really want to change if I'm still in the disease, whether I'm drunk or sober. So I really love that. Um, and the having a philosophy of a man who having a headache beats himself on the head with a hammer so he can't feel the ache, right? That's just great. You want me to go on, or do you want to add to that?
Um, yeah, I'll add to that. I actually would like to share my screen and show everyone something. Um,
Okay.
this is something that one of my friends from the program has brought to my attention. I like visual aids. So you have this spiritual malady here. So we're irritable, discontent, restless, irritable, and discontented at first. But then we also go to the mental obsession, which is we are unable to differentiate the true from the false, right? So, once I have that mental obsession, I am not able to tell you the truth of anything. Like I will tell you everything that is like a lie and everything that is just not true about anything. And then we have this first drink, so we get that ease and comfort. Um, I just
If I
cannot
can wait, just briefly interrupt you for the
go
purpose of
ahead.
the recording. Emily's showing a screen that start at the top. It says the cycle, the doctor's opinion, page XX drink, an arrow to physical allergy, an arrow to spree, I guess, and then emerging remorseful, never again, and then the cycle repeats unless it is halted, which go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, yeah. So we had the physical allergy, which is the phenomenon of craving. I just can't have one drink. I have three, four, and then it could go on to a spree, which is days, weeks, or months, until we get remorseful. And then, we start swearing off. It's like we beat our head with that hammer, right? Like on page 23 that we were just talking about. And then, once we get to like our rock bottom of some type or form, it's different for everyone. We try to reach out and we go to AA and we have a few simple rules, which is what this book talks about, right? And then until we are absolutely willing to follow instructions by someone like a sponsor, or a spiritual advisor, that's when we have that physical, or sorry, that spiritual awakening, and then we have that entire psychic change, and then that's when we start, sponsoring other people, so until we get our life together, we go through like this cycle of, the spiritual malady with the mental obsession, the first drink, the physical allergy, the spree, and then we never again, we think that we can never again drink, but until we can, stop completely, without um drinking again, we have to go through the 12 steps and have that spiritual awakening. So that's all I had for that. I just wanted to share this because I'm a very visual aid person. So for me to look at this, like this is very helpful for me. So yeah, I just like to stop and look at that. So that just kind of helps me look at this paragraph and comprehend that a little bit better because it breaks it down into a cycle. Um
Makes sense.
I'll yeah, absolutely. I'll read the next paragraph. We're on page 23 in the middle of the page. Once in a while, he may tell the truth, and the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are baffled a lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game, but they often suspect that they are down for the count. Yeah, so that kind of just keeps reapplying those, you know, um words, that spiritual aspect of it, like, we're baffled because, we just can't stop drinking and we're like, well, wondering why we can't stop. And that just goes back to, the obsession and this, the spiritual malady, Um, So, I like to ask myself, why am I doing this? Like, why am I drinking, myself to death? And then until I realize that I'm actually doing it, it's definitely baffling for sure. And I didn't realize that until I came into these rooms of AA and got a sponsor and worked the 12 steps, and now I have a solution. I don't have to drink over anything life, circumstantial at all, so whether I'm, dealing with a death in the family or I'm losing my job or something, I don't have to drink over that. And that kind of just reiterates it for me. And it's a good reminder. That's why I love going to these big book studies because, it just constantly reminds me that, I don't have to drink and that I do have a solution today. Um, so that is all I have. If you want to go ahead, Elizabeth.
When it says once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. And there's the obsession that somehow, someday they will beat the game. And, for any of you who don't know me, I didn't realize alcohol was the problem. I just thought something was wrong with me. I don't know why I keep ending up in these places I didn't plan on being, you know, doing things I didn't plan on doing. I just remember thinking, what's wrong with me? I have a story about getting trapped at the top of a fence trying to go get my car, and I had one of those moments where I was like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? I'm trapped. I'm stuck on this metal fence and with, one leg on one side, one leg on the other. I can't. And I was going to move my car so it wouldn't get towed at the end of the night, and I was wasted. And I just remember that moment, and I lost a necklace that was important to me that night too. It was a pendant my grandparents had given me, and because it got broken on the fence. And but God, so many of those where I just have this little glimmer of something's not right, you know. But what's crazy is I never knew it was alcohol. I mean, some of you know I got here by accident through Al-Anon. One Al-Anon meeting. That's all it took for me to go, okay, I need to be across the hall. I needed both, but needed to be across the hall for sure. But um and I hid this from myself for years, and then, my whole like so many years in sobriety being in self-will and management of my life, somehow I'm gonna make my life work, I'm gonna make it work. I've got three kids, I've got one with special needs, two dads, three schools, constant chaos. We left the dress shoes at dad's. Now we need poster board. It's 10 p.m. at night and life is insane, right? I had no ability to be in the moment. I'm totally in, really the disease. I was dry, and so I was one of those people, always crazy, always a mess, never could be useful to anyone, totally in the bedevilments. And I didn't even know it. That's what blows my mind. All those years. And Al and I go to a study about the Tebow papers on Thursdays, and we talk about the ego, and it exists in the subconscious mind. The reason I'm baffled is because my ego is not even letting me know that something needs to change. It's hiding it from me in all kinds of different ways. And it's amazing. It's like my friend calls it spiritual whack-a-mole. Do you want me to read the next one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So we're at the bottom of page 23. How true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal. But everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will. The tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail.
Mm.
This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. And real briefly, because I'm on page 32. I think I got here in time. Like I got here young and pretty easily. So, but I have definitely met a lot of people that drank socially until like their 40s, and then something happened, somebody died or they got divorced, and then it was like a waiting there, it was waiting for them the whole time, and they would say, I don't understand. So that time that comes for an alcoholic is different for everyone, and I'll never forget the first person who told me that. It's like she stepped over the line. And I love that phrase about once you become a pickle, you can't go back to being a cucumber anymore. It's over, you know? But like it's just so mysterious. They don't know why it happens, and it just does to people. And that's um but yeah, go ahead, Emily.
Um, I do like these couple of paragraphs for sure. There's a lot in here. I like to go back to page 23 when it says lethargy. I didn't know what that meant when I first came in, so I put a state of unusual drowsiness, tiredness, and lack of energy and mental alertness, that just makes more sense. Because it says here, um, how true this is for is few realize in a vague way their families and friends sense these drinkers are abnormal, but everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself with his lethargy and assert his willpower. So, we put in tiredness and lack of control and mental alertness. That makes so much more sense to me than, that word for sure. Um, and then it says the tragic truth is that the man of a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost control at certain point in his drinking of his alcoholic. He passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is absolutely of no avail. So it's absolutely no help or benefit. Like we have absolutely um no one can help us or we can benefit from being around people that drink at all. And then of course in the italics it says have lost the power of choice and drink, as so well called willpower becomes practically non-existent. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not like that normal person. I was talking to actually Elizabeth the other day, and I was just saying how my brother can have like a half a beer instead of like a full beer. And it just baffles me that, he can only drink like half of it and leave it. It's just like what the heck is that? Like, you know, I don't know how to have half of a cup of wine or a half of a margarita or a half a shot of tequila or whatever I would drink. Like I don't know what that is. Um, and then of course I'd make a fool out of myself because I go above and beyond when I drink. So it's that suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without the defense against the first drink. Yeah, absolutely. I say time and time again, I just can't have one. I have to have bottles and bottles and bottles, until I black out. And, I make a fool out of myself. I have ruined people's lives over, my drinking. I started really young. I was 7, and I didn't get sober until I was 23. So, I have definitely done some damage in people's lives, and today I'm just so grateful that, I'm able to stay sober and I'm able to, make those amends and, make it better. I'm trying to be a better person today, and, that's just the result of this program for sure. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they are hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. There is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, it won't burn me this time, so here's how. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, for God's sakes, how did I ever get started again? Only to have that thought supplanted by, well, I'll stop with the sixth drink, or what's the use anyhow? I call that the F it button there. And yeah, this was actually the first thing in the book that I connected with. The paragraph on page 31 about trying different things to control drinking, and then this thing about the thinking about I'm going to put my hand on a hot stove and not get burned. Oh, honey, so smart. I have my own rules. I don't need to follow all your rules. I can And I could get away with a lot, right? I could study, the night before the test and get an A. I could write a paper. There were so many things that I could do that I thought I could do everything, and get away with it. And the fact is, I couldn't. I got kicked out of school the first like 3 months after I started drinking. The consequences started coming immediately, but in my head, I never connected them with what I was doing, right? I always had, again, alibis. Oh, it's somebody else's fault. It's definitely nothing I'm doing. But that just that it won't burn me. No, no, no. You don't understand, and still, I mean, I love the first time I learned the definition of step two when it said insanity is doing the same things over and over and expecting different results. I remember learning that in early recovery and like, oh, that makes so much sense. Oh my gosh. That's it for me. Go ahead.
Yeah, I like that sentence where it says, the stove won't burn me. It just reminds me of times, when I worked in a restaurant, and they're like, oh yeah, use pot holders, use towels to get stuff out of the oven. But I'm just that disobedient alcoholic. I like to grab things with my bare hands and wonder why I get burned. And that's kind of how my life, was. I burned my own life down, into the ground until I ask God for help. It's that sentence here. It says, "For God's sake, how did I ever get started again?" It's just it's definitely cunning, baffling, and powerful for sure. I just I just really think that, that's what newcomers do. They don't want to listen, and then, they blame us, for their human will, and they kind of want, human aid as well. And that does not happen because, it's only through God, that can help us, for sure. But that's all I have, so I will read the next paragraph. We are on the bottom of page 24. When this sort of thinking is fully established in an alcoholic or an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there would be there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop but cannot. Um, yeah, absolutely. When I put here so many want to stop but cannot. I put is that my experience? Yeah, absolutely. I just, I can't stop. People can beg me and, tell me that it's bad for me. And, the doctor could tell me that, but, until I, concede into my innermost self that, that I am an alcoholic and that I am powerless and unmanageable, step one, I could not stop. And then, it was just a journey, coming to believe, that a power greater than myself could restore myself to sanity. I didn't believe in God when I first came in. And until, I had a God of my own understanding to stop drinking, that's just kind of when the miracle happened. And, just thank God that that happened really early on in sobriety. Because otherwise I would have gone back out and then it would have been the cycle again. So, I would have just kept going and going and going, and my binges were just very long. They happened for months. I couldn't stop. So that's all I have for that.
Also, I just want to point out for me, pages 24 and 25, starting at the very top of 24 and going to the very bottom of 25 is a great little summary of the problem and the solution. If sometimes occasionally I'll get someone to read that first to get them introduced. Like, here's because I love these pages. Pages are amazing. When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop but cannot. Oh, I get goosebumps at this part. These are probably two of my favorite paragraphs. I got so many favorites, but there is a solution. Almost none of us liked the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. but we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When, therefore, we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we had been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we have not even dreamed. And I want to say, like, I think about that sentence a lot, a lot, a lot, where it says almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride. I still don't. I still don't like it. But I know from bitter experience that, and watching others go back out, that the humbling of the ego is the most important ongoing thing that we do here. And I have to be willing, it can be very painful. Um, and this is what it's talking about on page 60, where it says, we're at step 3. What does that mean? And what do we do? Which I always love that question, right? Because it is. Step 3 is so mysterious. Like, what the heck does that even mean? And I love that the book asks that question. But it says, we have come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. This isn't just talking about drinking, right? It doesn't have to be talking about drinking. It can be talking about how I'm living and how I'm trying to manage my life. When I met my current and still sponsor that I've had for almost 23 years, um, she had me do a very slow and thorough first step on everything I was doing in my life at the time when I was 14 and a half years sober. And she had me write a lot of stuff down. And when I write stuff down, I can't ignore it, which I can ignore it if I just read this book and think about it for a minute, and then poof, it's gone. And when I got to the end of chapter 3 with her, I was absolutely miserable. And I asked her, am I supposed to be miserable? Right? So I have to be shown in my hard head, and I think I can do all this stuff, right? Doing that process for me and doing it that way for me really made me see the futility of my life, how I had been living. And I'm lucky I didn't go back out. I know a lot of people, they hit that place, that self-will and sobriety, and it's so important to keep growing. That's what she told me. You have to keep growing. And I love that there's nothing left for us. When I asked her, am I supposed to, she said, yeah, you have to have no place else to go but God. I'll never forget when she said that. Um, I need to be done with my way. And when I work with people who aren't done with their way, I know I can't help them, unfortunately. And it can show up in all different kind of ways. Rebecca and I have talked about it before, and we're working with people and they just demand to do things their own way. The yeah, but they still have their own answers. And I say, you know what? You still got your own way of doing things. Like, you can do that, but then you don't need my help, which usually pisses people off. But, um, it's true. If you still got some moves, you still got some moves. Are you done or not? Are you done with your way or not? Yeah. Go ahead, Emily.
I just want to add one thing. I just like the last sentence. We have been found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence, which we had not even dreamed. It's just, today I just realized that, I am sober, but it's only through the grace of God. I could not do this myself. And I'm coming up on 5 years, next week, and I'm just like very like wowed. Thank you. I just, I just realized that, this is a we program. I just could not do this on my own. And, the promises have definitely, happened in my life, very slowly. It says in the 9 step promises, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, it just, it's happened to me very slowly. And I'm just so grateful that, God had to put those obstacles and those, problems in my life to make me realize, that it's my pride and ego that gets in my way, a lot in my life. And it just humbles me for sure because it just reminds me that I need God's help regardless, and I just want to do things my way. But when I do things my way, things just do not go right and I destroy everything in my life and my path, you know. I am that hurt, I am that tornado that runs through everyone's lives and does and says whatever I want without realizing that there's consequences. And absolutely, there is consequences to, my actions, what I say, everything. So that's all I had for this, but I'll read the next paragraph. We are on page 25 in the middle of the page. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences. There's an asterisk there. It says fully explain appendix 2. Um, you want to stop and read there? Go to the spiritual experience?
Oh,
It's up to you.
yeah, read the whole paragraph and then we'll go over there.
All right. Which we have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He had commenced or has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we can never do by ourselves. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I love so many sentences in here. I tend to get people who are a little more on the agnostic side.
Mhm.
And I like to kind of hang out there because I find it to be helpful to kind of be there. And that's how I've felt guided. And I love, you know, we're talking about experiences here. We're not talking about knowledge or understanding even, but it says, or is it, have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life. You know, and I love it's going to say on page 27, you know, something else about our emotional displacements and rearrangements, right? So this is about a personality change. And how is that coming about? I know for me that I constantly turn to a God of my understanding and ask to show me what you would like me to be and who you would like me to show up as today. And I love where it says, he commenced to accomplish those things for us, which we could never do by ourselves. And I have found that to be true. I even had an experience yesterday. I had a very justified resentment. If I told you the story, you'd be like, "Oh yeah, of course," you know, and stay away from that person. Like that's just bad. But over time, I have kept it in prayer. And yesterday, I actually reached out to them, and we're going to talk later. But like, yeah, people in my life who know the whole story are like, "Whoa, that's definitely God, right?" Definitely not Elizabeth's human power and will and anything like that. And you know what? And it feels so genuine. It's not feeling, I don't feel forced. I don't feel like anything other than a wish to be helpful and kind to this person. That's all I feel. And that is definitely my higher power. Yeah, let's go to the spiritual appendix. Should we do that?
Yeah, spiritual experience on page 567.
567 in the big book, fourth edition.
Yes, appendix 2. Yeah, absolutely. I'll start. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which, upon careful readings, shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described, though it was not our intention to create such an impression. Many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feelings and outlook. You want to pick up? I'm on a mung.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Personality changes. Not everyone has that white light thing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Although I've had some of those experiences over time, you know, where it seems like God showed up at the times when I really needed God to be there. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety because they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. He finally realizes he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life, that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. And I often talk about the reaction to life. I had some trauma growing up, like a lot of us, but I believe I've also learned in it since we're in the Big Book Compendium, which isn't technically AA. I'm going to go ahead and say this. We have a guy in Louisville who was in addiction medicine, and he said that we have a brain chemistry problem, that what we share with other addicts, I'm an alcoholic because when I put alcohol in my system, something happens. But what I share with other addicts is a brain chemistry problem. And I have a reaction to life. And I probably could have had the most nurturing, supportive, upbringing in the world. And probably my mind would have gone, why did you look at me funny? Oh, I must be a horrible person, right? I must be less than, right? Because that brain chemistry is going to slant me negative no matter what. And what's crazy is, it says that we can't do this himself alone. And the reason why I used to see, I'm a problem solver all my life. I have focused on how to solve problems, right? I'll solve your problems. I'm a great employee because you give me a problem. If there's 10 ways not to solve it, I'm going to find that 11th way. And in tech, I was in the tech field and we'd call it the bubblegum and paperclip method, right? But when I do that, I'm focused on my plans and designs. I am stuck in the problem because I'm thinking about what Elizabeth thinks she needs to fix herself. I'm not focused on anyone else. I don't even notice you at that point. I'm so self-absorbed at that point, right? Because I'm just trying to solve Elizabeth's life problems so I can make them work so I can be okay. I'm not turning to God. I'm not thinking about you, right? I'm stuck in an endless loop of self, and that's why it doesn't work. It absolutely doesn't work. But when I shift to a higher power and I say, God help me, top of page 63, right? Provided what we needed so long as we stayed close to him and performed his work well, not mine, not my work, then something shifts in me. I'm on a different path, right? And it might not be easy, right? Things God wants me to do sometimes, that I'm guided to do or AA wants me to do, like be nice to someone who's mean to me, right? Sometimes I am faking it till I make it. Suit up and show up. Those little slogans help, right? But something happens to me when I do that. God meets me halfway. It's happened for me so many times. There's some kind of, like when we do amends and we have some kind of crazy unexpected outcome that just heals, like it says, years of, something going on. And it's amazing. And I can't do that by myself, right? I turn and ask God. And so I'm open-minded, open hands, ready to be who God wants me to be instead of locked in that endless loop of self, trying to figure it out, being completely, other people see us and it's like, these people are so self-absorbed. What the hell? And we're just like, I'm just trying to be okay and make my life work, right? But still, right? The effect is there. I mean, I don't think that we're assholes. I think we're just trying to be okay. But the world thinks, oh my God, these people, like, they don't even see it, right? But then when I love what it says, that we can't see the change sometimes, other people see it first. And that happened for me so many times. Or I don't know that a problem has gotten better. Something that's been a problem for me. Like yesterday when I saw this person in a meeting and I felt inspired to reach out to her. I didn't see that coming. And it felt very genuine. There were no motives, right? And some stuff does take a really long time. And I don't know, it's God's time. It's God's timing, all of it. But it's cool when, you reach a situation that maybe you handled differently in the past, and then you find that you have had this change in your reaction to life, and it's freaking beautiful. I know my husband's experiencing it because I live with him, and I'm hard to live with. And his reaction to me has changed. It's amazing, and it's just through doing this work. Go ahead, Emily.
I mean, yeah, you pretty much summed it up, but I just really like this sentence. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life, that such a change can hardly have been brought about himself alone. You know, my sponsor, has noticed such a change in me, since I've started working with her. I've definitely have taken more action for sure. I like to procrastinate and make excuses for everything, but I'm kind of at a point in my sobriety now where I just kind of just do it. It's not just to get it out of the way, or just because I don't want to do it. Like getting on my knees every morning, to pray or whatever. But it's kind of just like a routine. It's not just like a habit, that I just do, or I just don't want to do it, but she sees the change in me before I ever saw the change in myself. And, that's just through God. I'll finish reading. We're on page 568 at the top. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided that he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. And then Herbert Spencer. There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. I love that quote. It just gives me chills every time I read it. But yeah, I definitely like when it says willingness, honesty, and open mindedness are essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. Yeah, I had to be open, willing, and honest with my sponsor, in order to make our relationship work and to work the steps, with her and helping other people too. That definitely is a huge thing in sponsorship as well. I have to be like that to my sponsees, being open, honest, and willing, to help them in the best way that I can. And it's only through God that I'm able to be these things. So yeah, I really just like the spiritual experience because at first I didn't know what that meant, but once you read it and it has the asterisk on page 25, that just makes much more sense and it gives it more context. So that is all I have for that.
I want to point out too, like this is one of the hardest things to ask an alcoholic to do, especially one that's had trauma in their background,
Hmm.
to just trust us, just try it. Because I know for me, it's like I want to know what's going to happen the next 5 years of my life before I'm going to do anything, right? Because I'm terrified to try anything, especially trust you guys to tell me. And one of the things I'm most grateful for is the fact that I did believe people who had worse consequences than me. And I'll never forget when I was about, I guess, in my early 30s, this woman in my hometown had relapsed and lost everything. And she said, remember how easy it was for us to get sober when we were young? Because she got sober at 18, I got sober at 21. And she said, I couldn't stop. And I'll never forget the way she said that. And I just am so grateful for that every day because I remember that. And I've watched people who seem to get sober pretty easily. And I've met people, they went back out after 20 years and now they cannot quit, and they had it an easier time before. And I'm so glad I haven't had to repeat that experiment and find out because I know I drove in blackouts. I'd be back in the car for sure, now texting and driving and drinking, and I'd probably be dead pretty fast. But luckily, yeah, it says facing these problems in the light of our experience. Like believe, I always tell new people, first of all, find out if you're an alcoholic, learn what it is, read the book, do whatever research you have to do and find out if your behavior matches, your thinking, your feeling matches. And then please believe, like especially if you haven't had to go through worse, believe that it could happen to you, right? Because I have the same disease as people that have gone through far worse, lost their mobility, lost their freedom, lost, all kinds of stuff. And I didn't have to do all that, but I'm really glad because I'm so hard-headed. Usually I have to try everything and prove to you that I can do it, right? So this is definitely grace of God for me that I didn't have to do that with drinking. I have not had to do that with drinking, thank God. Um, and the God consciousness, I feel like for me, and the other thing I wanted to point out too is, where is it? This is slowly over a period of time, you know. For me, I could take step 2 out of the list of 12 and put it over here because that came to believe has come through experience, through results, right? I didn't just believe. I wasn't just like, oh yeah. I mean, I can go to church and sit there and feel nothing. And I feel stuff in AA when I'm working with others, and I get that inspiration. People ask me questions, I don't know how to answer them, and then I'm given inspiration on what to say. And it turns out it's the exact same thing they needed to hear, right? And that happens. It's like, wow, that's cool, right? When I don't have the answers. But it's been through repeated results of working this program that I believe. And I don't know where I am. If there's some graph, where is Elizabeth on her thing? Like I don't really know, but I know people way far ahead of me, and I learn from them, especially people that are really, able to be in the world of the spirit, and not kind of be down here on earth, like dealing with the mud and the mess that I still find myself dealing with sometimes, wanting to control, fix, and clean and change, I'd like to be more up there more often, and that's what I'm doing, right? I continue to work and use these tools, the spiritual kit of tools laid at our feet. Um, and I also love the contempt prior to investigation. And that's, I'm glad they used that quote. It's definitely good for alcoholics with the alcoholic ego. I told somebody yesterday, one of the biggest problems that faces an alcoholic is their ego. And because they were asking me, how to pick a sponsor, and, it was a man, can he pick a woman? And I was like, I mean, every situation is different. I know that I would not want to be responsible for the male ego. I don't know how that's a whole nother, I don't know how to deal with that. I just said for that reason, I would suggest maybe a man, but that's how I felt inspired to give him feedback at that time. Right. But I barely know him either. And again, I don't want to set any precedents on that statement. I think everything's different. Okay. Do
Mhm.
we want to open it up for shares?
Yep, let me
Um,
pause. Let me stop it.
okay.